Welcome to the Your Music Industry Podcast.
The podcast that gives you a direct route into the music industry's greatest minds. Your Music Industry is proudly brought to you by the Liverpool Audio Network with your host, Daniel Fisher-Jones.
Welcome to the second episode of Your Music Industry. I've personally been completely blown away by the response we've had to our first episode with KUSP. If you haven't heard that yet, check it out now. It's available on iTunes, Acast, Spotify, SoundCloud and YouTube. If there are any streaming platforms that you use that aren't on that list, let us know and we'll try our best to get it on there for you too. In this episode, we're exploring the world of mastering. We're going to be talking about working with artists such as Coldplay, Fatboy Slim and Professor Green, and exploring someone's journey in the music industry. So before I introduce our first guest of the show, I want to say an absolutely huge thank you to this episode's sponsor. By supporting this podcast, they're supporting your growth as an artist and as an individual. As a creative artist in the world of sound, you need the best tools for the job. Some of those tools will include the likes of VST synths and sound files, aka samples. Splice is the subscription platform for exactly that. With a vast array of over 1 million samples, they cater to every genre and creative spark. Each sample is thoroughly tagged, enabling you to smoothly explore their whole library. Having tags such as the key of the sample, you have the power to explore an array of samples that harmonically resonate with your track. With the filtered search in seconds, you can be finding inspiration and sample files that not only harmonically fit with your track, but are also of extreme high quality. Splice Sounds comes in the form of a monthly subscription, which, for only $7.99 a month, gives you access to this whole sound library. And on top of that, Splice have kindly offered every single listener of this podcast 1 free month. Use the code Liverpool Audio to obtain your free month, or head over to splice.com/Liverpool-audio. Recently, I was researching into the most misunderstood topics in electronic music production. The outcome of this research was mastering. This is part of the reason why our upcoming event with Waves Audio has a session based on mastering. After this realisation, I couldn't think of anyone better to invite onto the show. From his early days of working with Partridge Studios engineering the likes of Coldplay's first album, to most recently mastering for the likes of Fatboy Slim, Tinchy Stryder and Professor Green, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to this episode's guest, double platinum engineer, Mike Cave. So let's start from the beginning. Mike, where did you come from being a musician to the world of Par Street to Loft?
Well, I was in bands basically from probably, actually my first band was with two of my mates from school when I was 10. So from that point on, we were out gigging. We had residencies in town when we were like 12, playing little bars and stuff like that. Getting paid we used to get paid in Nuki Brown. I don't know quite what they'd make of that nowadays. But,
yeah.
And yeah, just working, being in bands through my teens. And then, I'm just trying to think. I went to London College of Music.
Yeah.
And then I came back and I got in a band called the Sunlights, and then we signed to Mercury.
Oh wow.
So that was a good opportunity to work with some big producers and just get a sense of, because I didn't have a clue what a producer did or whatever. So that was my insight into like how to make a record, and sometimes how not to make a record as well, which is equally valid, you know. And then on the back of that, we got caught up in a big buyout with, it was Seagram at the time, owned Polygram, which was Mercury. Then they got bought out and then became part of Universal and all that. So we just got caught up in that and got dropped after a few years. But we had four years, I think, of being on Mercury and getting some good experience. And then actually at the same time, I was actually getting involved in making the record as well. So I was doing a lot of the recording, I was doing loads of the editing, and then by the time we got dropped, to be honest, I was so happy to just be able to start making some records, and that's when I was just pestering Par Street to get in the door. And luckily one day someone was ill. One of the engineers was ill, and I got a phone call saying, "Can you get here in like 10 minutes?" And that was it then. I didn't leave the building for 10 years after that.
So when you say pestering Par Street, What actually was that? Was that throwing them already mixed stuff, throwing your portfolio?
No, I didn't really have a portfolio, I don't think, at that point. What it was, they used to get a stack of CVs every week, and I'm sure it's even worse now, probably. But I used to just pop my head in every few days, and Paul Lewis, who was running the building, I think he just got sick of me popping in, to be honest. He was like, oh Christ, for Christ's sake, just give this lad some work. So, but I actually got really thrown in at the deep end. Like, I told him how great I was and everything, and then he just threw me in on a cast session as the main engineer, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I was looking at the SSL, just and my brain was fried. But actually, to be honest with you, that's probably the best way I learn, is just get thrown in and you just make it work, do you know what I mean? And luckily the bands were brilliant, like, I don't know if you know KUSP, but lovely bunch of lads, and I just had to come clean with them. I was like, you know what, I haven't really got a clue, just bear with me. And they did, and it was fine, you know what I mean? And then, yeah, so I didn't leave the building then for years. I had a room upstairs that I was crashing in, and that was it. Yeah, so it was, didn't see much daylight for a while, but you know, it's a fine line, isn't it, between pestering someone for work and not annoying them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Consistent.
Yeah. So it's a balance, and I keep saying this to students and that when I do guest lectures, is like 90% of what we do is people skills. It's like you can learn all the other stuff. We can learn how to mix a record or whatever, but if you can't get on with people, no one's going to want to work with you. And that's the basics of everything we do. So just get on with people, and the rest will come. That's, you know, I'd say that every time. Yeah.
So covering Park Street, you've worked with, say, the likes of Ken Nelson, Jeremy Wheatley on bands like Coldplay and a range of others. So what was that experience like working with huge bands?
Funnily enough, Jeremy Wheatley was involved in that cast session.
Oh, really?
So I don't think he liked me, to be honest, at first. But funnily enough, we've worked on, since then, we've worked on records together, me and Jeremy, and there's a couple of projects he's mixed half of, and I've mixed half of, and I think he's come round to the fact that I can mix records now. He's all right with me. But do you know what? It was invaluable, all of that stuff. Like Ken was, I mean, he probably doesn't see it this way, but he was a bit of a mentor of mine, really. Some of the stuff that he said, and you know, just sitting in a room with him for a couple of hours I'd learn more in that couple of hours than I'd learn on my own, scratching my head for days, you know. So a lot of my fundamental skill set has come from Ken, really. That's invaluable, and unfortunately nowadays that's not a route that's as available as it was. I was very lucky to get to sit and watch top producers making records and how they deal with people, how they extract great performances from people and all that, and that's an essential part of what we do. But if I hadn't seen that happening, I don't think I'd have understood it, you know. So that I was very lucky. But I had to work really hard as well. It's not handed to you on a plate, this business, you know. You have to graft, and if you want it enough, you've got to be in that cream of the crop. All these students coming out of these courses, I always say to all the SAE lot and the LIPA lot and all that, it's like, think how many people are graduating this year off these music tech courses. There might be 1,000 people in the UK, and there's probably 10 jobs. So unless you're up there and you really want it, what chance have you got to get in with any of these studios? There's not many left, is there? Many of these residentials and big places to work in. So it's a different route. It's just a different route in, which is actually one of the reasons why I'm really keen on doing these type of things, because otherwise, how are they going to get industry input unless we talk to them? And you can see, I've seen over the last 10 years is like a sort of deterioration of quality involved in you know, not just the sonics, but the performances and the general production of. I'm not saying there's not great records out there, but there's a lot of people making records and not really knowing what they're doing, and that's partly because they haven't had that input that I was lucky enough to have. So unless we talk to them, it's just going to keep deteriorating. So it's important and I always tell all my mates and people who I've grown up with how important that is, because some of them aren't talking to people. So
So how would they go about that? Obviously, like talking to people, is it as you did, going to Park Street and showing your face, or would it be online nowadays with the power of the internet, or what would be some key like?
It's a difficult one, but I mean, I probably get, I don't know, 10 emails a week maybe from students that say, can I come and shadow you, or can I come and assist, or whatever. To be honest with you, probably 9 out of those 10, or maybe all of them, I'll dismiss straight away. And the reason why is because they're missing the point of I can almost sort of, before I even open the email, I can almost tell you how it goes, and it'll be like, you know, I really like what you're doing, can I come and learn from you? I think I'd really benefit from it. So it's all about them.
Yeah, it's not value for you.
Yeah, and so, you know, however much I want to help them, I can't, I've got a job to do, and, you know, my working day is very busy, so unless they can add value to me, I just can't afford to bring them in. Yeah. So I think the approach, and I've said this so many times to students, is like, if you are going to approach producers and mixers or whoever with a view to getting in the door, then you've got to add value. You've got to let them know that you're going to take some pressure off their working day. And that then is, for me, is like, okay, yeah, cool. If you can go and grab me lunch or something, that's going to mean I can finish this edit, or, you know, whatever. And then down the line, you know, if that's a way in for you, you can start to build that relationship then, and then, you know, it's give and take, you know. And to be honest with you, most people like myself, the way the industry is now, are working in our own little bubbles. Sometimes we can't afford assistance on particular sessions because the budgets are tight. So we need help. You know, ideally, I'd love to have 2 assistants with me all the time, but a lot of projects I'm getting involved with, there's just no budget for it. And I must admit, it doesn't sit that well with me to have people in and not pay them. But to validate paying them, they've got to be taking some pressure off me, you know. So it's a give and take relationship, really. So I think that's one of the things to not, if you're going to approach people, just make that clear that, you know, you want to add value to them as well. And I think people will warm to that.
So would you say a cold email is the best, or person is more personal in a sense, or?
Personal, I think personal is always the best, isn't it? I mean, you know, the way the world is now, we can email anyone, can't we? And you may or may not get a response from them, but everyone's contactable. But the problem with that is that they get a lot more contact. So if I get 10 emails a week, how do I even know what they're like? They might be just a pain in the arse, some of them, you know, or some of them might be dead cool, and I might never know. So I can't really judge that from an email unless there's a couple of people recently that have got in touch with me, and I've just the way they've worded the email, I've thought, he seems like a cool guy. He seems like he gets it. And so I'll meet them for a coffee, and, you know, we'll see if we can work something out. And I much prefer that, because when you're sitting with someone, you can get a sense of like, am I going to be able to have this guy or this girl sitting in a session with some of my clients and them not make a fool of me, or do you know what I mean? Because there's a definite dynamic there between some of my clients. I've got to be very careful who I have sitting in on sessions with them, because every person in the room like adds a certain dynamic to that session, and, you know, that can be negative or positive. And I have had it in the past where I've sort of done favors for people and brought their son in or their daughter in or something, and actually my clients asked them to leave because it's just been getting in the way of the session, or, you know, so it puts me in a difficult position sometimes. So again, it goes back to people skills, doesn't it? Just if you can get on with people, man, it's like makes a world of difference. It just makes everything so much easier, you know.
And it might be a stupid question, but how can someone in this industry develop their interpersonal skills per se? Is it, for example, attending more events, or, because it's obviously a hard thing to develop, really, isn't it?
Be nice.
Be nice.
Just be a nice person. And it's not an easy. I don't even know if I'm remotely qualified to answer that one.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's
we're
like,
human. So.
Yeah, we're all human, aren't we? And we're all like, just be a nice person. I think that's the key thing. And be genuine. You know, it's like that whole thing when people talk about networking. I hate that word, because I don't feel like it's about that. I think it's about building relationships with, genuine relationships with people. Because if people just get a sense that you just want to get a job off them, and, it's like, well, just build relationships. And to be honest with you, if you pick out 50 A&R men, let's say, take this for an example, there might be like half of them that I really click with and half I don't. So it's like, well, why do I really want to work with the ones that I don't click with, and why would they want to work with me? So it's like, just put yourself out there and build those relationships with people that you like, and all the rest will fall into place. It's like, if you get on with people, and then comes the work side of it. I always say to people, well, to continue getting work, because that's a question that I get a lot, is like, how do you carry on getting work and build your career and keep that? And there's three things. Once you've made that contact with A&R or whoever your clients are, if you can deliver records on time, on budget, and still be quality, then that's all you have to do, literally, and the phone will keep ringing. And that's what I've always tried to keep that quality control there. And sometimes jobs come in and they need so much work that it just doesn't, the budget doesn't qualify. So it's like, I can't make a great record on that budget for that project, so I can't do it, because then I've got to put my name to it. Yeah. And you're only as good as your last job. So, you take your chances there. If you deliver one shit job, you guarantee that all the A&R will hear that one job and go, oh, Mike's lost the plot here, and the phone stops ringing. And it's that brutal. So I always approach every job as if it's going to be like the best project I've done, and that's, obviously that doesn't always happen, but if you approach it like that, you're going to be pretty sure that you're going to deliver something damn good, at the end of it. And that's what keeps work coming back. Simple as that. And sometimes I have to take a hit with budgets and things like that, if things take a bit longer than they're supposed to. It's not like the old days where we used to get like a day rate plus a production fee or a mix fee or whatever. So if something takes longer, you get paid more. It's not like that anymore. Labels hate that shit. They've got a pot of money and they want an all-in deal to go, right, I'm going to deliver you this EP or this album or whatever for your pot of money. Don't worry, I'll take all the pressure off you. If anything goes wrong, it's not going to cost you any more, So you've got to take that on board nowadays as well, which is why you need your own studio, you need your own facility, so you can take the hit with time frames extending or whatever. And that's the way I've kept busy, just deliver on time, on budget, and deliver quality.
So I'd like to explore kind of Loft in your studio in a minute, but in terms of talking about jobs and keeping work coming, how in the past few years have you been getting them leads, them initial jobs for the likes of Nicole Scherzinger and Tinchy Stryder? Has it been through your connections from your Park Street days, or?
No. But to be honest with you, it's down to that delivering, make records and make them to the best of your ability. And if people like those records, they will get in touch and ask you, I love that, can you make this? And to be honest with you, things like Nicole would have come through Polydor, because I will have worked on other jobs for them. Tinchy, I can't remember where Tinchy came from. Where would that have come through? It's always word of mouth, pretty much. Someone will have said something to someone else, and it's like, oh, you want to get Mike to mix your record or whatever, or someone will have heard it and got in touch. I mean, that's why credits are so important. It's difficult now because people hear records, and unless they go and research it, they don't know who's worked on it, which isn't great for us, because we want people to know what we've worked on. So there is ways of finding out. Like if you go on allmusic.com or discogs.com or whatever, you'll see my name against things that I've worked on, but it's not easy. People don't go to those lengths to find stuff out, so they just don't really think about it.
Have you seen Spotify soon to start rolling out credits on?
So what's going to happen now, I don't know where they're up to, but the mastering industry as a whole is starting a new broadcast WAV format, which is going to include credits. So we're going to be able to embed our credits into the masters. So I don't quite know. I know the software companies are taking it on board. So you've got like Sonic and Sadie and all those companies are already starting to incorporate it, but I don't know quite where they're up to with it because we're not doing it yet. But that'll help. Now, how that will then work with other compressed formats, I don't know yet. Yeah. You might have to ask someone else, but I'm trying to keep abreast of it, and I know it's coming, it's on the way, but not yet. So that'll help. But we still haven't got like those physical formats with the artwork is where we used to get a lot of work from.
Are you enjoying this episode with Mike Cave? What have you learned so far? Make sure you let us know on social media with #YourMusicIndustry or at Liverpool Audio. This podcast wouldn't be possible without our sponsor. Splice have been so supportive with the launch of Your Music Industry, so make sure you check out their platform and use your free month today. Use code Liverpool Audio or visit splice.com/Liverpool-audio.
So it's, again, word of mouth, but that can work against you, as I said. If you do a project that doesn't turn out that great, you've got to find a way of fixing that, because it's important that everything you put your name to is spot on, you know. And if you get a sense that you're not the right man to do that, you need to know when to say, I can't do that project, or it's not for me, you know. And that's difficult, isn't it, when we're trying to pay the bills, to actually say no to things. But it's super important in the long term to make sure that we just take on the jobs that we know we can make great. And you know, I'm not the producer for every job. I think the net is quite wide in terms of the genres that I work on, compared to some producers. I haven't been pigeonholed into one thing, which I love, and I actually fought for that to not happen. But there's still jobs that come in that I'm like, well, why are they asking me to do that? Because it's not really what I do, or, you know. But and sometimes I'll just say that. I'll just say, well, I don't know. I mean, if I love a project, I'll still say I'd love to try it, you know, but it might not be my thing or whatever. So yeah, it just depends. It really depends.
So it'd be nice to learn more about Loft, the story of Loft. So how you went from Park Street to starting your own studio, and as you mentioned previously, what are some of the benefits of having your own space?
It's essential, to be honest. I can't think of how you would work as a producer now without a studio. I just don't know how you do that, because labels aren't going to go and pay for you to go and sit in Park Street for 6 weeks to make a record. It's not, you know, you can go in and do your drums and then get out of there quick. So you do need a facility. It doesn't have to be, you know, exceptional. It doesn't have to be like that, but whatever setup you've got there, you need to learn it and get the most out of it, and be able to be comfortable in it, you know. Records, the way records are made now with Recall, it's almost like records are never finished until they're on Spotify, you know, or whatever. I call it the tweak culture, you know. It's like, even though you deliver something that's great, someone in the camp will have a thought and go, oh, I wonder what it would sound like if you did that, or you did that. And so it's like, how would you do that? How would you work under those terms if you didn't have a studio? You couldn't just keep popping back to a big studio to record something. It just doesn't make sense. So that's essential. And to be honest with you, I got onto that really early, like before most people. I was also onto Pro Tools a lot earlier than most people. When we were at Park Street, we had a little editing suite with sound tools, which was the very first incarnation of Pro Tools. It was a 2-track system, and we just used to do stereo edits on it. But there was only me and I think another lad who knew how to use it, and he showed me how to use it. So between us, we were doing all the editing, digital editing, and it was a new thing back then. So then from that point, then I actually went and bought a Pro Tools rig, because I realised that no studios had them. So we were hiring them in, 300-400 quid a day. And I was like, hang on a minute, this doesn't make sense, you know what I mean? To have to, you're hiring a studio for like 800 quid a day, and then you have to pay another 300-400 quid for a Pro Tools rig. So basically, I can't really tell you how I managed to do it, but I managed, and it was tough, but I managed to get myself a rig and pay it off. But I didn't pay for it up front. So I was basically, as I was hiring it out, I was paying it off.
Yeah.
So it worked out really well. Now what happened was, because a lot of producers at the time didn't want to know about Pro Tools because it was a distraction from the creative side and no one really knew about it. So I started getting loads of work with producers as the Pro Tools engineer. And that kept me busy for quite a few years. But also what I found is that we were sitting in big studios with me on a Pro Tools rig. And that seemed daft as well, because it was like, hang on, we're paying so much for this room, but I don't need to be in this room because I'm on a computer and it could be anywhere. So that was the point of like, hang on a minute, what we need is another space that doesn't cost, low overhead space, where I can put the Pro Tools rig and we can do the edits and then move in and out of big studios. So that's what I did. And that was the start of Loft. So the space is great. Have you been in there?
I've never been.
All right, well, it's a great space. It's like a Manhattan style loft apartment type vibe. And as I say, we didn't have much gear in there at the start. I had a Pro Tools rig, some monitoring and a few bits and bobs. But then what started happening was, it was that transition of like people starting to make records out of big studios. So we're doing a lot more stuff in the loft than we were in big studios, but then we were short of gear. So it was like, shit, okay, we need to put some more gear in here. And then before I knew it, it was building up, and then it was basically a full high-end studio, but in a loft space, And since then, I've just tweaked it, and it's become a great mix room for me. And as you know, run the mastering facility from there, and it's like, it's been great, really. I just did it at the right time. And so from quite early on, I've been able to offer labels all in deals quite comfortably and know. And to be honest with you, a lot of people weren't even doing that then, particularly a lot of the heavyweight mixers that I was trying to sort of infiltrate at the time. They were on day rates still. They were on like a mix rate plus extra days, and then if you needed a recall, they'd have to go back in because they were all on analog desks and all that. So I embraced I wouldn't say right in the box, but I embraced the sort of total recall thing, aside from a few bits of outboard, but I embraced that quite early. So that's another thing, that as soon as labels got onto the fact that, oh, hang on, what's this recall thing? We can tweak mixes, across a few weeks or whatever, at no cost. Once they got onto that, they realised that I was doing it, and most of the heavyweights weren't. So I started taking work off a lot of them guys as well. So it was just a bit forward thinking and a bit of luck, really, that the way I saw it go, and it actually went.
Yeah.
And obviously now that's how people make records.
Yeah.
I don't think you could work as a mixer now on a big analog board unless you're on big budgets. Like, I know a couple of the big heavyweight mixers are still doing it. But I'm imagining they're struggling with recalls, even doing stems, because people are like, okay, well, I'll do like some stem prints for you, and then we can work off that. It's like, yeah, that's all well and good, unless you have to change something on the multi-track. Because often someone will say, oh, I don't like that snare drum, can we put another snare on? It's like, well, I've just printed the drum stem, so we'll have to go back on the analog desk. It's like messy. So total recall is the only way, really. Aside from, I do still use outboards, but it's quite easy to recall it, so it's quite fast.
So getting to, say, Loft, I know it can be a big commitment to go and get your own studio. At that point, did you have, say, like a sustainable income to support it, or was it a big leap forward to?
I was just working my arse off. That was it. And basically what I was doing was every job that came in, every big job that came in and I got a chunk of money, it would go straight back in. I wasn't spending money on anything else apart from gear. I was just buying gear. And to be honest with you, a lot of that gear that I was buying back then is going to last me my whole career. All those like old valve compressors and, decent monitoring, all of that stuff will last you your whole career. It sounds, you might go and spend 10 grand on a set of monitors and it might seem crazy or extreme, but that lasts you 20 years, 30 years, So a lot of that kit is even though it's expensive, I'd say it's a good investment. Things like Pro Tools rigs, digital desks, all that, to be honest with you, you've got to really make them work for you because they're going to go in a skip in like 10 years' time. So there's not going to be any residual value in them type of things later, but these are tools that we need, so you can't avoid that, really. Just make them pay for themselves when, while you've got them. A good Pro Tools rig should last you I don't know, up to 10 years probably before you need to update it. I'm not one of these people that has to update the latest thing. In fact, I totally swerve that idea of things, because once you've got, particularly with a Pro Tools rig, once you've got it stable and it works and it doesn't crash and it lets you do your job all day, just leave it alone. You know, I see people like throwing plugins on every day and updating operating systems and wanting the latest Pro Tools. To be honest with you, never go with the latest Pro Tools version, because it's always full of bugs. You could probably say the same about operating systems as well. So I always let other people do that, find all the bugs for me, and then later on I'll maybe jump another step up. But that's another tip, is like, just get your system stable, because if someone's paying you for the day, they don't want your computer crashing all day. They want to get work done and all that. So that's quite important as well.
So in terms of a Pro Tools rig, for the listeners, what does that actually entail? Is it just the software, or is it the whole?
Well, it can be all of those things. Like when going back to my assistant days, Pro Tools rigs were always hardware based. So they always were like cards in the computer and then interfaces that go with that. Those type of systems are obviously still available, and that's what I use. I use a HDX rig. But having said that, you can go and buy, in fact, you don't even need to buy a Pro Tools rig. You can get a free one, can't you, on a software-based Pro Tools Free or whatever it's called, which, to be honest with you, is pretty damn similar to the HDX rig that I use. It's not, you know, all the functionality is the same. You might have a few extra tricks up its sleeve, but nothing that's going to stop you making a great record. So there's no excuse really. And I think I've said this to a few students, is like, just go and get Pro Tools Free and spend a year with that, and you'll be fine. And then maybe upgrade. You can get another slightly better system for a few £100, or, you know, whatever. But you definitely don't need to go and spend a load of money on a Pro Tools rig, for sure. It's not about that. But for me, it's important. As a mixer, you need a bigger system that's going to handle all the jobs that are coming in. So sometimes we're getting sent like 200-300 tracks to mix, you know, as a multi-track, which is ridiculous. That's a whole other story. So there's obviously a bit of surgery and prep to do there to get that to make sense. But you need a rig that's going to handle that amount of tracks to start with, so you can actually just work through it. But as a producer or an engineer or a writer, you don't particularly need a big Pro Tools rig.
I bet that's a big file size, that.
I had a mix last week arrive, and it was 36 gig. And I was just like, what? I mean, it had strings and brass and all sorts of things in there with multiple takes on it, but no one had bothered to like condense it into make any sense. So this is another thing, like I could probably talk for a couple of hours about production and decision making. Like, you know, back in the day when we were working on 16 track or 24 track or whatever, we had to make production decisions to fit it all on the tape. You know, we had to decide on things at the time and go, okay, we're going to keep that, we're going to bin that, or we're going to bounce those two things in, and that's it. They work together, make that decision. Now, no one seems to want to make a decision, so everything gets left open-ended. It's like, there's 200 tracks. We did all this and this and this, see what you think. And so all those decisions are left to the mixer, which to me is crazy, because then, I don't know, I mean, it's hard work for me, but also as a producer, wouldn't you want to make those decisions yourself?
Yeah, because they're kind of creative and critical.
Yeah, well, you know, whenever I'm producing a project, I want it to have a stamp on it when it goes to get mixed. I don't want to let the mixer decide. That's not what it's about for me. So, and also as well, it saves time. You know, if you're just bold with your decisions and go, this is how it's going to be, and move on, you'd be surprised how quick you can make records. You know, some of my favourite records that I've been involved with are the ones that have taken the least time. You know, the ones that you just in and just get it done and out, because you haven't got time to second guess. You know, you just go in with your instinct of what feels right, and it's done. And then, to be honest with you, when you listen back a few years later, you go, that sounds great, you know, it sounds like really fresh, and that's because it wasn't overthought. So I think we can ponder way too much with all the technology and all that. Just get it done. And
I know Brian Eno says a lot about the power of limitation when you're limited.
Oh, it's a massive thing. Another thing, plugins. Like, I mean, the amount of people that I'll see them open the plugins list, and the list just goes off the page. It's like, well, when we used to mix records on an SSL or a Neve or something, we had one EQ, one type of EQ, and one type of dynamics. And we used to mix records fine. It's like, so why do you need 50 EQs and 50 different compressors? Have 5, you know what I mean? Like, pick 5 that you love, and that, you know, each one will have a trick that works for each given situation or whatever. And bin the rest. Don't bin them, but put them in an unused folder. You know, you can dip into them maybe if you need something now and again. But generally, if I want to EQ something, I don't want to open a list of 50 EQs. I want to just, before I've even opened the list, I sort of know which EQ in my head is going to do it. So I just go, and I've got 5 or 10 EQs, and I just go in and do it and move on. You know. Yeah. So that's something I would say to people, be careful of. And every year I have like a plug-in cull, you know, at the end of the year. It's like, what haven't I used for a while that's in that list? And just move it out. And it just, you'd be surprised how quick your workflow will become. Just get stuff done and move on. Simple.
I think it'd be interesting to kind of explore the world of plugins, because obviously there's a lot out there.
It's I've
looked into
some great ones, like some shit ones as well, but...
Because you've done some kind of tutorials, you like little insight into you through the Sonics platform.
Oh yeah, the Sonics stuff's great. Yeah. Brilliant plugins. I mean, you know what, there's some, when people ask about this argument of in the box, out the box, like what do you use your analog gear for and what do you use your plugins for? Generally, the quick answer to that is that I tend to use the plugins for the more surgical stuff, things that need fixing, you know, problematic stuff, and then I tend to use the outboard gear to enhance and to add character and soul or whatever you want to call it to things. But even now you've got plugins that emulate that outboard gear and do it very well. So, you know, you can definitely do it all in the box if you want. It's just that I find it still there's some bits of outboard that just do a job very quickly and instantly for me, and so I keep using them. But that whole plugin thing is mind-blowing. When I can imagine someone just getting into the industry and just seeing all these plugins, just like, whoa, what is going on, you know? But I think what I do is, like, when sometimes new plugins come in and I'm like, I need that piece of kit because it does something that nothing else does. There's no bit of outboard gear that does that or whatever. So then I'll invest in that and I'll use it, you know. But a lot of the stuff that's coming through, like the emulations of things and tape emulate, it's all just like, there's lots of companies doing it, and it's like, once you've got one tape emulation or a couple that do it great, just use them and don't worry about the rest, you know. But,
so what kind of plugins are in your inventory? Like, what are your go-tos for different things?
So, I mean, what I could do is do you a little list of like things that I use. That might
we can add them in the show notes. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That might be helpful for at least people to try those things and see. But I'd say most of the stuff that is like my essential tools that I use in terms of plugins are things that fix stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So the specific.
Yeah. So like dynamic EQs, notch filters, and things that I just can't do out of the box. And then there is like tape emulations. The UAD stuff's great. You can't knock that at all. In fact, the UAD plugin range was probably my turning point of like going from some mixing to it totally in the box, because I was like, okay, now I've got a set of tools that sound familiar to me from using tape, and you know, so that was a turning point for me, UAD, and then you know, other companies then followed. Some of the wave stuff's great. I know people are using Slate, although I don't use that, but people rave about that. But so I think the key thing, it's easy to demo stuff. It's, you know, it doesn't cost you anything to demo things. Just try stuff out, and whatever works for you, get a list together of like the priority things, that the tools that you think are really useful to you, and just use those, you know. But I can definitely do you a little list of some to try for people.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Mike. So at our masterclass in January, you touched on something that was like the highlight for me for the whole event, which is the McGurk Effect.
Oh yeah, the McGurk. Oh my God, yeah, that's so important. That.
So what actually is it for the listeners, and what actually is the impact of it? in your experience?
Impact of what, sorry?
The McGurk Effect.
Okay, well, this is something that was freaking me out. When I started working in the box, from that whole transition of going from working purely analog to starting to work a little bit in the box, what I realised I was doing, and it took me a little while to work it out, but I stopped listening to an extent and started watching what was going on. So I'm looking at all these EQ graphs and shit on the plugin interfaces, and I'm stopping listening as I'm looking at them, and then I start freaking out when I'm looking at a graph and thinking, oh, I've boosted that too much, or or I'm looking at a meter and it's clipping and I'm thinking, oh, I can't have that clipping. But it's like, well, hang on, does it sound good? What's it sound like? So once I realised what I was doing, I realised that, hang on, I've got to stop looking at the screen and start listening. And then someone told me about the McGurk Effect, which essentially is endorsing all of those concerns that I had, and it made sense. And basically what it's saying, for anyone that hasn't seen that clip, 90% of our sensory input is through our eyes, and it's the last thing we want. Is we want our ears to be the main senses working. So we need to find ways to take that out of the equation, and the simple answer is just close your eyes when you're making decisions. And that isn't always, there's more to it than that, but that's like a starting point, is like stop looking at the screens and start listening to the decisions you're making. If you think about how many decisions do we make in a day mixing a record? Hundreds, So I want every one of those decisions that I'm making to be based on what I'm hearing, nothing else, not what I'm seeing, So I sort of find ways around that in terms of, and control surfaces are good for this. This is what, when control surfaces first came out, and they were, if you look at the icon desks, they were like 50 grand, and people were like, what, it's just a big mouse, what a waste of money. But they were totally missing the point of actually what that allows us to do is we can control our plugins and we can control everything in the computer without looking at a screen.
Yeah. And
that to me is invaluable. Now, as soon as I realized that, everything just started, I was making better records, and faster as well, much faster. So find whatever setup you're on, find ways to stop looking at the screens. I have screensavers that on a key command, so pretty much every 5 minutes, the screens will be getting blanked out, and I'll be listening to something. Have I just made the right decisions on that? And then I'll maybe have to go back into the screen to check something. But generally, the screens stay off as much as possible. And I have a little bit of a method of A/B-ing things, because unless you've got someone else in the room that you can truly A/B decisions with, you need to find a way of not fooling yourself into not knowing. And to be honest with you, let's say when you're bypassing a plugin or whatever, you'd be surprised if you're doing a true A/B comparison. You'd be surprised how often you decide not to use it. And sometimes I've got my eyes closed, I'm clicking the bypass button away.
Like 20 times,
yeah.
You don't know which
and I'm
one.
I'm thinking, no, I prefer this one. And I'm convinced that the plugin's in. And I open my eyes and it's bypassed. So you've just got to trust your ears, basically, and not worry about what you're seeing so much. McGurk Effect, though, there is, if you go on YouTube and just Google McGurk Effect, you'll get the clip that I showed you guys, and it'll open you.
Great clip.
Yeah.
Literally after, I was like, someone needs to sample it.
It'll open your mind. I'm sure someone's already done that. Yeah.
So I think to touch on kind of as we've already mentioned, productivity in the studio. I know you mentioned a lot about kind of listening levels and also ear fatigue. How do you deal with that in the studio?
Just don't listen too loud. I mean, we're only human at the end of the day. If you blast your ears, they take a certain amount of time to recover from that. In which time you cannot make proper judgment. So, and it doesn't take long. If you turn the speakers up for a minute or two, I probably can't make proper decisions for a few hours after that. So I'm very aware of when the speakers get turned up. And there is a couple of, I generally monitor quite quiet. there's two reasons why I'll turn the speakers up. One, for just to check proper low end, to see if I can feel what's there and if it's right, because I can sort of get a sense of that. But that will be for 30 seconds probably at a time, and then I'll make that decision and move on. The other reason is for harshness. I mean, so many records are delivered to me quite harsh, like the recordings. The digital format, the digital recording as a format is very unforgiving. You know, you put something in and that's exactly what comes out, so it doesn't get flattered or rounded off or whatever. So what happens over the course of like multi-tracking stuff, it just becomes harsher and harsher and harsher. Sometimes when you're listening at low level, you think something's fine, but then you turn it up and it's actually really uncomfortable in your ears. So sometimes I have to just turn it up for a little while just to check that, because I want to be able to turn the speakers up and still enjoy it. I don't want it to be uncomfortable, you know, and I struggle to judge that when it's quiet. So yeah, maybe for 10 seconds or something, I'll just crank it up and go, no, still too harsh, and then I'll back it off and work on that.
Do you know kind of what level you listen at on average? Is like 70 decibels, or you're not sure?
It's difficult to put it in terms of dB really, because it depends on the room and the monitoring and all. But I'd say you should be able to talk the way we're talking over it quite comfortably. So if I can't talk to a client as we're listening to something, it's probably too loud for me to. And what you'll find is, what people will find, if they're monitoring too loud, they're actually not able to judge balances anyway. Everything sounds great when it's loud, and it's like, it's only when you really turn it right down and then you start to notice the mistakes and the things that need fixing. They pop out like a sore thumb when it's quiet. So it's easier as well. Not only are you saving your ears and you're able to work a longer day, but you can actually hear the mistakes dead clearly, particularly with things like vocal rides and all that. There's no way I could do vocal rides loud. It just, I don't know how. I have to do them really quiet. And, you know, depending on your monitoring, you could argue to listen on lots of different systems as well.
So have you got like kind of multiple monitors in Loft, or have you just got one?
I've got loads, but a lot of what I've got there is domestic, because at the end of the day, that's what people listen to records on. So, you know, little beatboxes or little iPod things. I've also got my mix bus linked to the TV next door.
Oh wow, that's very cool.
So I can take a break from the studio, go and make a coffee, and still listen to the mix through the TV or whatever. You know, so there's a lot of actually that thing of getting out of the studio is almost part of the thing for me as well. Like I find it difficult to judge a lot of things in the studio, because it's not a natural environment that people listen to records in. You know, once I deliver something and it's out in the world, no one's going to listen to it in the studio. Everyone's in the car or, you know, in a club or whatever. So they're the environments that I want to listen to it in and get away from all that equipment. I don't want to see all that. I want to just listen to it like an end user would. And then all of a sudden you start noticing things that you didn't notice in the studio. Yeah. So that's a big part of it for me as well. I mean, I guess back in the day, people used to go and listen in the car or whatever, didn't they? But that's a bit, it's quite time consuming, that, because you got to then print a mix and take it out to the car. You don't have to do that really nowadays. You need to just, there's other ways you can do it. And sometimes it's as simple as closing your eyes. You know what I mean? Just pretend you're not in the studio. And there's, you find your own ways. I mean, some people might disagree and go, I don't do it like that, I do it like this. It's just fine, you know what I mean? It doesn't bother me. It's just that's my way of judging things. That's all I've got.
So, with your prior experience originally coming from more of a musician's background, has that informed kind of being an engineer in terms of like the creative side of things? Yeah,
it makes a big difference. Like, just not. I think the main difference it's made for me in the past is being able to relate to musicians. Like, how can you produce a musician if you don't understand what they're doing? You're not making it easy for yourself, are you? So if you can, you know, when we go into a project as a producer, we have a vision of how we want the record to sound. Now that might be a collaborative thing. It usually is, and that's the way it probably should be. But sometimes an artist will lean on the producer to create that stamp, which is fine again. But for me to relay that vision to a musician or to share my thoughts on it, I need to be able to speak to them like a musician. Otherwise, it's going to get lost in translation. And to be honest with you, they're probably going to think I'm a bit hard work if I'm not explaining things the way they understand them. Yeah. So coming at it from a musician's point of view just made life easier. It just meant that I could speak to people in the way they understand, you know. So if people are trying to get into the industry and produce and engineer and they haven't got any musical background, I'd suggest that they start incorporating that into what they're doing. You know, whether that's like piano lessons or bit of music, bit of theory maybe. I mean, I did a whole year of theory and thought, what the fuck am I doing this for? You know, it's like not what I want to do. But then actually in Park Street, a lot of the time we were doing big string sessions and orchestral stuff. And the producers were throwing a score in front of me and going, right, drop us in, blah, 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 blah. And if I didn't have that knowledge, that had to freak me out. So actually that was quite constructive, that phase. But so, and I'd say actually more importantly than that is trying to train your ears, train your ears musically. Like, you know, how am I supposed to produce a vocal if I don't know when something's in tune or not? You know, or how am I supposed to know when a guitar's out of tune? You know, it's impossible really. And it's like, that's part of what delivers a great record and delivers great performances, is like, you know, you might have to say to the vocalist, no, just do that line again because it's not right or whatever. But I've worked with producers in the past that don't know, they can't hear stuff like that, and it makes things really difficult, you know. So ear training and a bit of music theory goes a long way to communicate things, and it's easy to do. I mean, you can do all that ear training stuff on YouTube now, or there's little apps that do it and all that.
I know Isotope have got a good platform online that you can learn from. Yeah,
perfect. Yeah, there's so many ways, isn't there, nowadays to get that in. So just put the hours in and do it. You know?
So I think one final thing I'd like to touch on, as the music industry can be a very non-stop rat race. Mm-hmm. How do you kind of deal with kind of having like a healthy lifestyle within the industry? With sometimes it can be working long hours.
The simple answer is you don't. You know, and the reality of it is actually, and this is, I may as well say this to people before they get into the industry, or, you know, as they're thinking of getting into it, to do what we do long term, you have to sacrifice a lot. And that involves family life, relationships, social life, all those things I've had to sacrifice in one form or another to do this job. And you know, you need. Thankfully enough, I've got people around me loved ones around me that understand what I do and accept that. But in the past, I've fucked up a lot of relationships and stuff because I've been stuck in Park Street basically when they wanted me to go out clubbing or whatever. But so, and I think where people will go wrong if they expect to be able to do all that stuff and do this and do it well. No, not going to happen. I don't know of anyone that has managed to pull that off anyway. So that's just something to take on board. Now there is ways of making it work, but I think a big part of it is just having people around you that understand, and wanting it enough. Really, you know, if you don't want it enough, it's just not going to happen, because it's more of a lifestyle than a career, I think, really, in terms of I don't think I ever really switch off. I mean, I shouldn't say that, because I do, you know, I have holidays and whatever, but I'm always thinking, and I'm always listening, absorbing myself in music and trying to think of other ways of doing things and keeping fresh and all that. And it's like, it never stops. It just doesn't stop, like. So, yeah, if someone's expecting to do it part-time and do it well, no, forget it.
I actually love that, how it's not a career, it's a lifestyle. That is really
so
true.
It is, you know, it's I can't think of another way of putting it, but you don't switch off from it. It's a constant thing. And it's, you know, I'm not sort of putting it across in a very positive way, but I love it. I absolutely love my job, you know what I mean? It's like, and I think that's part of it. You've got to love it, because there's no way I would have grafted like I've grafted if I didn't. I just wouldn't have done it, you know? So if you're not really totally absorbed in it and loving it, then I just wouldn't bother, really.
So before my last question, where can people find her online?
So basically, I wear two hats basically, as a mixer and loft mastering engineer. So I've got two websites. So we've got loftmastering.com and I've got mikecave.co.uk. So the Loft Mastering page will deal with all things mastering. It's a good page because there's lots of information about how to deliver masters and explaining the processes and all that. So it's actually got some good information on there if someone wants to check it out. The Mike Cave site is more about my mix projects and production projects, and it's basically more for labels and A&R, just so they can see what I've been working on. And so yeah, that's the 2 points of contact, really.
So my final question, if someone asked you for only one tip within the music industry, what would the tip be? And it can be for mastering, mixing, or lifestyle, or anything.
What, in terms of building a successful career, you mean? Just staying busy?
Yeah.
Just be nice.
Be nice.
Just get on with people. You know, that, as I say, 90% people skills. The rest of it we can learn on the job. You know what I mean? And if you've got the people skills, there'll be someone there that will share their skills with you. You know, their technical skills. If you can get on with people, you'll get in the room and people will want to help you. Simple as that. And that's where you start to learn the other stuff.
I'd like to say a big thank you to Mike Cave for taking time out of his busy mastering schedule to record this episode with us. What did you think of the show? Was there anything in particular that you've taken from the show? Make sure you let us know over on social media with #YourMusicIndustry or at Liverpool Audio. Don't forget to connect with Mike Cave too. He's got a lot of fantastic projects coming up. If you've got a guest you'd love to be on the show, head over to yourmusicindustry.com/request to let us know all about them. We're now at the end of the second episode of the Your Music Industry podcast. This couldn't have happened without the support of our sponsor, Splice. If you're looking for samples, VST synths, or a community developing their sounds together, Splice is the place for you. Head over to splice.com/Liverpool-audio today to gain your free month, or use the code LiverpoolAudio. I'm really grateful that you've listened to this episode, and I can't wait to return next week with our next one. If you're working in the studio, playing out live, or having some time off to recharge, have a great week, and I'll see you then.